Hello everyone, DM Elms here, and I've been asked by the Bleeding Critic to tell you a story of horror therapy. This story is really one of the very first things that happened to me that instilled in me a love of horror and of being scared. When I was 5 years old, my mother was reading a hard copy version of the book The Shining, which was pretty much brand new then. It was even being talked about in TV news, and people were discussing this book. And every time my mom and I would go to the bookstore, you see, I am old. We had bookstores then. But what happened was one night it was raining, and something, I really don't remember what happened to a neighbor of ours, and it was kind of a little miniature crisis, like maybe a plumbing problem or something like that. Might have had something to do with the storm because it was raining. But my parents went out over to my neighbor's house for a brief time, just, a little while. That was, again, proof I'm old, because you weren't in trouble for leaving a 5-year-old alone for a couple of minutes. And the book was on the shelf. Now, my parents had given me strict instructions not even to touch that book, so it had really instilled in me a lot of fear, because they talked about how, between each other, how horrifyingly scary it was. And I asked my mom questions, and she said, well, it's about a family in a hotel, and, that sort of thing, keeping it really vague. Oh, and there's a topiary, and, just some scary stuff happens. So I was really curious. I had to know what was going on in that book. So, me being me, the fact that my parents were gone told me that this would be a good time to go over and pick up the book The Shining and check it out. So I did. With the thunder and lightning outside, I crept over, and even though no one was in the house, I still remember walking very carefully. Like I was worried the door would open suddenly and they'd see me holding the copy of The Shining, and they would say, "Dee, what are you doing?" And once I picked up that book, I opened it up and I looked at a random page. Now, I don't remember the exact thing that the page said specifically, but I remember very much what kind of description it was. It was describing Danny or some other character, I think it was Danny, looking at a wall. And when Danny looked at the wall, the description in the book said something along the lines of, "A blossom of blood began to form on the wall, spreading outward from a central point." Something like that. Don't remember the exact sentence, but it was pretty much that. Now, at that exact moment, I got a nosebleed, but not just a nosebleed that would have made me think, oh, look, I'm bleeding from reading this book. That would be scary enough, but that's not what happened to me. What happened was my nose started bleeding in that way that it does when you don't feel it, when you don't even realize. You know, the kind where you look at your hand after you brush, you like feel an itch and you brush your nose and, oh, look, I'm bleeding. That's sort of what happened to me, except I was holding the book and looking down at it. So my nose bled a big, big droplet that I didn't see fall from my nose to the book page. Instead, all I saw was a blossom of red blood spraying itself out over the page, expanding, covering the letters right at the sentence that I was reading at the exact moment that I read about the blossom of blood in the book. I let out a scream. I was so scared. I was wearing pajamas and no shoes or socks, but that did not stop me from running. And I remember running and getting a few steps, and only then did I realize I was still holding the book and I hadn't thrown it away like I'd wanted to, and I threw it out of my hands and raced out the door, which I remember having trouble opening, which gives lie to all you people who complain about, oh, look at horror, they're so stupid, they can't open the door, why can't they open the door? Because when you're scared that blood is forming all over you and the world is going to turn into blood and ghosts are going to come out of everywhere and eat you with their ghost teeth or whatever, you can't open doors easily. I raced outside, and I remember as I took my steps out into the front yard, it was pouring rain. It was kind of flooding, and my feet were covered with water, and my feet were covered with pebbles, and it hurt. It hurt my feet because there was debris all over the front yard. And I ran to my mom, and I was crying, and I was horror struck, and she comforted me, and my parents were apologetic, and I told them what happened, and I got in a little bit of trouble for looking at the book when I wasn't supposed to. They reassured me, and I went to bed, and they made me realize that I was being silly, and they saw that I had a nosebleed and explained to me what happened, because I still didn't know before they said anything that I'd even had a nosebleed. I didn't realize it. Just looked like the book started bleeding. But what I remember too of this is that the next day, I remember all I wanted to do was read more of The Shining.